Hello everyone, welcome to DeFrost Seattle. This is a show that's produced by me, Margaret Elizabeth Spencer, and Rafael Rodriguez. We are coming to you today to talk about the Seattle Freeze. DeFrost Seattle is a show where we get to explore why do we have a Seattle Freeze here in Seattle, and also to really help people to understand how to maybe warm up a little bit and work on relationships. DeFrost is all about warming up relationships, and Rafael, he is a software engineer from Microsoft.
Yeah, I've lived in Seattle for about 5 years, so I had to overcome the Seattle Freeze myself to get the degree here.
Right, absolutely. And today we also have a special guest. Jodi Schilling is with us today, and she is a behavioral specialist, and she's going to be talking to us today a little bit about the behavior of people and how it relates to vulnerability. And so welcome, Jodi.
Thanks for having me. So good to be here.
Thank you. Well, so first tell me, what has been your experience with the Seattle Freeze?
Well, I definitely have experienced it after moving away and then coming back. So we have, as a family, we have 4 kids, my husband and I, and we lived here for several years. My husband and I grew up here, and then we lived in Alaska and Idaho, and when we came back, we really noticed that it just felt unfriendly, and people were cool in their response to us. So we experienced it, and my daughters are all in their 20s, and they definitely have that same feeling.
So can you give me an example? Like, so when you came back and you started feeling the Seattle Freeze, do you have a specific example of how it's manifested?
Yeah, I mean, even on the flights here, even at the airport, it just felt so different in the sense that in the Anchorage airport, you think it'd be cold up there, and they're very friendly, and everybody's welcome to Alaska, and same with Idaho, but there definitely is a difference in Seattle, and it's very noticeable. There's a standoffishness and a little bit of arrogance, and it doesn't feel good. So.
I know what you mean. I'm a California native myself, from Southern California, and I lived for 15 years in Portland, Oregon. When I go to Portland, even when I go back to visit, I find that it is actually a lot warmer. People are more friendly, they'll be more outgoing, more likely to talk to me. Even customer service seems to be elevated in other parts of the country. So I find this such a fascinating thing, and as a behavioral specialist, can you help us shed some light on why do you think this is occurring in Seattle?
Yeah, I think that in my role, one of the things we talk about and in trying to understand where behavior comes from, often what is going on is there's emotions that are underlying what people are, the way that they're portraying is based on the emotions they're feeling. And for some reason, I think we also mirror, if this is a neuroscience kind of phenomena that we see, but we mirror behavior that we see from other people as well. And so there's what they're called mirror neurons. And so if that starts to become kind of a way that people interact, then they will react that way back and forth. So I think that maybe how the phenomena in Seattle maybe has happened because people are responding to the way other people are responding to them, and it just takes hold that way.
Do you think that the weather could be something to do with this?
I am not one to be qualified to say that, but I do think that we definitely know that we're affected by cloudy weather, and that I think is a great theory.
Right.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how your children have been affected through this process.
Yes, my daughters are all, as we all are, different personalities, and I work a lot with kids. I also have a son, and I work a lot with kids that have neurodiversity, and I think that what they've experienced with whether they're if they have a bubbling personality or they're more reserved, they definitely have felt like there's just not a lot of opportunities where they feel welcomed, and that just is a natural way for them to interact. back. And so my daughter, as one example, my middle daughter is not, she's in, her lease is coming up and she's wanting to move out of state because of the Seattle freeze. That's her reasoning.
Because she feels that there's more warmth in the cities.
Yeah, and just that there just isn't a great reception for her to make friends in any kind of relationships, really.
So harder to make friends, yeah. Have you
Yeah.
noticed that, Raphael? Have you gone to other, traveled to other cities in the US?
Well, the only place in the US I lived was Seattle, so it's a very good base for comparison. But what I noticed is that people here are very comfortable within their place. But it's up to you to break the ice and make that initial contact. So it didn't happen like naturally, but I had like to put myself out there, start talking to people, and to actually overcome the freeze.
Right, that's good. And yes, it's possible. I mean, some people believe that there really is no problem with the Seattle freeze in Seattle. You know, some people think, oh, I'm just sure if you just smile at people, they smile back. And that's true. I mean, you can overcome. But the whole point is, how hard do you have to work at this? And should you have to work so hard to try to break into someone else's circles of friends? And can we be better? So that kind of leads me to my next question. What kind of things can we do? Do you have some advice for us, some tips?
Yes, I wanted to share a little bit about being vulnerable, and I think it probably feels like, okay, we're going straight to vulnerability, but it really, if you think about the conversations that you have with people, the times that you really connect are when you open up about something and you're willing to share, and that's something that I work with, the kids I work with, and when I'm analyzing behaviors and helping them to regulate their own emotions better. That's one thing we work on, is how do you get on the same level with someone in a way that says, I've been there too. This is a story that I have about, I can tell how you're feeling right now, or something like that, and you share a personal story. The other thing is, I would say that there's something called parallel kind of interaction, and it's really helpful when you aren't feeling like the conversation is going great, or you just are struggling kind of to connect. If you have another activity to do where you can be side by side, or you can just take a walk, or you can, if you're not like directly across, it's definitely a way that kind of lowers the stress for everyone, and so that's really a great tip to do anything.
Yeah.
Very interesting, yes.
Yeah. So you just offer, like, even if you're having a conversation, you're sitting across from somebody, and you just suggest, like, do you want to go over and look at the fire, or, and it'll just like break it up, and it really helps.
I think that's such a great idea. And everybody's always thinking about meeting for coffee, but what about meeting for a walk? It sounds like that would take some pressure off.
Yeah, and even just your sitting, even when you meet with somebody, if you sit across from each other, that kind of puts up a natural, like, confrontational kind of space. But you can sit side by side, that really feels a little safer as well.
So sort of like we're
Yeah,
sitting next to each other.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. That's a great tip. Do you have any others?
I would just say along the lines of conversation, the other thing that's important is eye contact. And one of the things, because I work with a lot of kids and teens that have struggles with neurodiversity, that's another area where reading social cues is difficult, and being able to look at people when you're speaking to them feels, again, uncomfortable. It can create anxiety. And so being able to do that and look at somebody and then look away and then look back kind of breaks it up, but then it feels better. And then, of course, there's all the nonverbal things, like when you have your hands up and open and you look like you're more willing to receive, to have a conversation, and then just even body language of leaning in when someone's speaking is another way of showing that you're open. That you're open to listening, nodding your head when they're talking. Just gives those signals to say it's safe to communicate. Connect.
Confirmations that I'm with you, I'm hearing you,
Yes.
I'm agreeing. So people feel warmth and acceptance.
Exactly, yes.
I love that.
Well, with the pandemic, we haven't wearing masks for the past 2 years, and mask?
Yeah, that's another thing that they're finding, especially because kids in particular take cues from, there's so much language that is called paralanguage or nonverbal, but they're really noticing that that's had an impact in being able to connect with kids, and so we've seen an increase in behaviors with kids. But I think that whenever you see that in one area, one population, you see it kind of in all populations. And so I guess the only thing I would say about with mask wearing is I think we have to be a little bit overly expressive with our eyes, because that's the only thing that we have to, or our other, body language with, like I said, the way you're holding your hands in your body. But being extra expressive with your eyes just is, that's what we have to do, because you don't have the full face effect.
Well, thank goodness that the mask mandate has been lifted, but some people are still choosing to wear them, so I think that's a really good question. How do you communicate, express yourself, and connect?
And with this 2 years of isolation, do you feel that people are even more frozen in Seattle than they were before?
Yes, I think that I do feel like there's almost like we've had a delay in being able to reconnect, just because we got out of practice. I think that that's definitely a phenomenon that I've seen, and I think we have one thing that I would offer is that I think we have to give grace to people too when one of our first reactions when people they appear to be kind of negative or closed off. And when you think about a relationship, you have an influence on the relationship between any two people, whether you know somebody or not. You have your side of the relationship that you can influence, and so from your side, you can, be like you said, if you smile or you have some type of interaction, then instead of having two people who are being kind of cold, you have one person who's warming it up a little. So you have that option there.
You can influence.
Exactly.
Yes. That's right. Yeah. So you can influence. So if you're walking down the trail and people seem grumpy and not smiling back at you, you can just be extra. And just a little extra, and a little happy. Hello, people. And I think sometimes you can bring a smile to someone's face. You can cheer them up and kind of make them break out of that freeze. Yeah, it's really good points. So as far as vulnerability goes, how do you feel that we could improve in terms of vulnerability?
Yeah, I think that vulnerability is one of those things where it doesn't feel comfortable for us, and so we tend to resist it. And we think that there's a sequence to it, like you can't be vulnerable right away with somebody, that you need to build trust over time. But actually it's the opposite. Vulnerability actually does build trust. And so we don't think of it that way. We think that we have to kind of protect ourselves, and that's just our natural human response. But sometimes the natural response that our brain offers for us isn't the best for building relationships. And so between vulnerability and then also I would add in from the other side, when you have judgment, that absolutely is a way that I think contributes to the freeze also, for sure. And so being able to have a combination of being willing to be vulnerable on your side, but also to not have judgment for any other person that you're interacting with.
Absolutely, and with these reality shows and a lot of these judging shows, people are critiqued more, closely. I think it was Simon Cowell on American Idol who really started this really harsh critique, and it almost was like it took off, and everybody felt like they could just, especially online, no holds barred, critique somebody. And I think maybe we need to reel this back in, because I kind of feel that the critiquing, the criticism has been very negative, and it's actually really hurtful to a lot of people as well.
Yeah, it goes too far, and I think that there's also, because we're able to do it online and it's not face to face, then people feel like they can be awful in their posts, or I think it has gotten under control too. And but that whole concept of judgment, when we can step back and just be really accepting that we all, like, I always talk about neurodiversity because I feel like we have, whether there's someone who's on the autism spectrum or they have mental health things going on for them, you know, we just, there's a lot of stigma around that, and it just needs to come down. We need to stop judging and recognize that we're all neurodiverse on some level. We all,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and neurodiversity is such a beautiful word. I love it so much more than, alternatives. It really helps people. And those of you who haven't heard this term before, it's really, I think, a more healthier way to talk about mental illness. And so also maybe people that not full-blown mental illness, but just certain type of health challenges that people have psychologically. So I think just saying this neurodivergence is a great way to just say there's many type of people out there, and it's okay. So very excited about you bringing that point up. The other point is vulnerability and what a big deal this is. So I'd love to hear your perspective on vulnerability. Rafa?
My perspective on this is I see that people already have some resistance to be like vulnerable because they fear to be seen as weak.
Right.
So like that fear of the perception of weakness sometimes make people like close themselves and I need to appear strong. So I will not look vulnerable. I don't want people from the outside to see where I can crack because they could attack me. So they go into that stranger danger mode. And so is that just my perception, or is there a consensus on this?
Yes, definitely. It's, as I was saying when I was first describing it, it's really because we are naturally going to protect ourselves. And so in that situation where you're saying, I feel like if I appear weak, then your brain is automatically going to connect to there's a threat, even if it's just a perceived threat, and it can be an emotional threat to you, and if you feel like your defenses need to come up and then you go into fight, flight, or freeze, that's what's happening there. And so vulnerability is something we kind of have to override that. We have to be able to say, connecting with somebody is fine, I'm not being threatened in a physical way, and I can handle this, and we just have to override it. If we do it, it's just like with anything, if you have an urge to do something and your brain, you succumb to that, then your brain repeats that over and over again. But if we do the opposite, then you get some practice with it, then you can be more vulnerable, and the more you do it, it's like anything, the more you do it, then it gets easier.
It's like exercise.
Yeah.
The way that I practice this, I give people like drops of vulnerability.
Oh, how do you do that?
You share something more personal with someone, and then you wait, and then you see what happens. And then you see if you don't go 100% vulnerable with someone from the get-go, but I try to not be completely closed off with that person, and then I give that person like a little bit of vulnerability to see like what that person does with the trust I put in them.
Okay, like an experiment.
Yes.
A little bit, and
And
see
see
how
what
they
they
will
do.
react.
Sometimes like you say something that's like more intimate, and then see if they are going to tell everybody about it. Sometimes you do.
Sometimes you can't keep a secret.
Exactly. So it's like, well, can I trust this person with a secret? Can I trust this person with something that's
It's personal.
with my vulnerable spots? And then you discover who you can trust and who you can't.
Right. That's wonderful. That's great advice. Yeah, because and some people, they mean well, but they just can't, keep a secret to save their life. Or they feel like they need to share with everybody everything. So I think baby steps, letting out, and also practicing letting your vulnerability out. And we're all human. I think the biggest point is we all make mistakes. Even us in Seattle as a collective group, the fact that we have this nickname as the Seattle Freeze. I mean, we're not perfect. Human beings are very imperfect, and we always have room for growth and learning. And so this is what is so awesome about us humans, is we get to learn, and hopefully this show can shed some light on that. So I'm very excited to have you here, and thank you so much for sharing all these insights. Jodi, I really appreciate that. And what I wanted to share with you guys is a little bit about some upcoming fun events we have. We have Venice is Sinking, a Venetian Ball. This is on April 23rd. It is an amazing spectacular. It's a whole new mask mandate, you guys. It's right over your eyes. Your mouth can be completely open. It's just eyes. You can do a mask that's painted on, or a fun little mask. Everybody usually gets beautiful gowns or rents or buys costumes, and it's a spectacular event.
Yeah, it looks very, very nice. So it's definitely be there.
Yay, I'm so excited. It's going to be a beautiful ball. It's a Venetian masquerade ball, and have you ever been to it?
I have not.
It's quite a spectacular event. There's all kinds of performers that are showing up every 30 minutes. There seems like there's a new performer, and it's just, there's a lot of cake room with gelato, and it's going to be a blast. So that's a fun event. We also have in Bellevue at Maggiano's on April 28th is the 5-course Italian food and beer pairing. Isn't that fun?
Yeah, it's very fun.
But yeah, brand new spin on the wine pairing with food. So this is beer pairing with food. And Maggiano's is hosting that. If you get a ticket, be sure to mention DeFrost and you get a free drink, bonus drink.
Free is always good.
Free is good. So those are some 2 fun events we have. We have a lot of exciting events coming up this summer. So stay tuned for DeFrost, and we will be bringing you some more fun insights. We will also be taking to the streets and taking to the Burt Gilman Trail to give you guys some feedback on what people in Seattle think. So again, thanks for meeting with us tonight, and every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock we're going to be coming live. So thanks so much, Raphael and Jim.